Welcome to Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now here's your host, Tony Safoian.
On today's episode of Cloud and Clear, finally in the hot seat, my Chief Legal Officer, Patrick Monaghan. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. It's a great pleasure to be here.
This is exciting because I don't even think this perspective is often shared to customers in the market. Like, this is a net new role for SADA. It's something we strategically wanted to do a couple of years ago, and you came on board, summertime last year.
Right.
So it's been, over a year, and I think we've accomplished a lot in a very short amount of time. But I think one of the things that attracted us to you to begin with in our search was your background, because your background is so interesting. So can we talk about Patrick Monaghan, the man?
Thank you, Tony. That's very kind, because it's not often that you hear a lawyer and interesting in the same sentence.
I agree with you.
So I'm flattered and honored to hear that. Just real quick. So my background is a little different than most conventional lawyers. So after graduating college, I was in the Navy for 4 years as an intelligence officer. I worked at one of the SEAL teams, Naval Special Warfare, for a bit, and then I spent 2 years at the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then I did my last tour in South Korea up in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, covering the joint security area there.
I think this is the most detail you've ever shared with me about what precisely you did before.
Because now I feel like we're in the circle of trust. So I don't mention these things in an interview. I don't want to scare anybody, but now we can talk about them freely.
Okay, so it's not top secret classified.
No, not so far.
Per se.
Not so
Not
far.
so far.
So I did that for 4 years, and I always had an intention of going on to graduate school, but I didn't know whether I wanted to study law. My dad's an attorney as well, or go a business route. So, and I'll get into why this is the natural progression of where I'm at SADA and working with you and the team. But I did a JD MBA, which is at the time a 4-year program. You get a law degree and you get your MBA at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Graduated, took the bar exam. Did not practice law right away. I went into investment banking, and I was a TMT, which is tech, media, telecom. And it's funny how in that era 15 years ago, tech was like a standalone discipline, whereas now it permeates everything in every industry, which is where SADA fits in nicely.
Right.
But I was a TMT banker for about 2 years, and but I was dating my wife-to-be long distance. She's Korean. She lives was based in South Korea at the time. So I decided to make the boldest move I ever made, which was to move out there to be with her, and I certainly haven't regretted that. But I went back to practicing law. I had a good relationship with a firm there, actually.
In Korea? In Seoul?
Practiced at a big, it's a Korean firm, but they service a lot of Fortune 500 like inbound investment companies doing business in East Asia.
And there's tons of those.
Tons of those. So maybe you're a supplier or a venture partner with Samsung Electronics, so a lot of semiconductor work, consumer electronics, working with like an LG or someone like that. Hyundai obviously has tons of suppliers and investment partners, and obviously it's a huge diversified economy.
And by the way, what's happened in South Korea in the last 15 years is remarkable.
It really is.
Isn't it?
They're very proud of the fact that it's the only country that went from being a aid recipient from the OECD to becoming a donor country. So it's an incredible rags to riches, like 40-year development story.
Amazing, yeah.
A lot of countries are trying to emulate. But so I was in Korea for about 10 years and was a partner at a firm called Kim & Chang, doing corporate transactional work, a lot of inbound investment, a bit of M&A, a bit of antitrust. And then around 2016, so this is 3.5, almost 4 years ago, I was approached by one of my clients, and he is a private equity investor. And he had been sitting on the board of a public company called Enodo. And Enodo is a listed company on the Stockholm NASDAQ in Sweden. It was and is a multinational company. They have operations in the UK, Sweden, Korea, Japan, and the US. And their main product is they make these digital smart pens. It's actually very, at the time was state of the art, but it's rather dated now. But basically they convert written text into digital content. And they also design software, enterprise software for enterprise customers. So for example, in Europe, we worked with like the National Health Service in the UK, because you have doctors, ambulance corps,
taking notes. Absolutely.
And we also had a consumer business called LiveScribe. They acquired a company up in Northern California called LiveScribe. And you can buy their pens for a lot of artists, graphic designers, etc. So my client was taking over at Enodo because the previous CEO was being sacked. It was kind of a crisis. The company was in a capital crunch. And he said, I'm trying to build a management team. Would you come on board as our CLO? And I was looking to do something different. I was also expecting to be based here in the U.S. I've been overseas a long time. I wanted to raise my kids in the U.S. again. Wanted to settle on the West Coast if I could. So I said, yeah, I look forward to it. Sounds like a great challenge. And it definitely was a great challenge. It was definitely a challenge, not always great, but it was definitely interesting. So as soon as I came, we had a number of existential crises. One was we have a key supplier, which is, I don't know if you know the toy company Leapfrog.
Of course.
They're still kicking around. They were acquired by a Chinese company, and they were in financial distress. And years ago, Enodo and Leapfrog had a joint development partnership where Leapfrog developed this optical sensor that Enodo put into all their pens.
Interesting.
So they had a line of children's books when you're teaching children to read. It was almost like a speak and spell.
I
remember 80s speak and spell? So you would read over the text and you could hear the words read back to you, like and so that was a big product that they had invested heavily in. And so they paid Enodo something like $10 million in non-recurring engineering costs, development, etc., for assignment of the intellectual property, got some of their background IP. So it's a long story short, but the product didn't sell anywhere near what they wanted it to. And I think when the new management came in at Leapfrog, it stuck in their craw that they paid all this money with no return. And so in 2016, they were sued on an unrelated matter by a patent troll. And I don't know, Tony, if you've seen patent trolls, but they're not to be trifled with.
Yes.
It's basically like the ransomware equivalent in the IP world.
Yes.
And so Leapfrog tried to draw Enodo into the suit as an indemnity. They basically said, this is your IP that we're being sued for. You need to take over this suit. And they then decided, when we didn't respond favorably to that for reasons that we thought were substantive, they basically stopped supplying the sensor that they had paid us the development cost. So basically they held us hostage. And we're talking Q3, Q4, and Enodo's business is very seasonal, right? So we have to get our product out to consumers for the Christmas holidays. And basically, if we can't meet production, we're completely, up the creek without a paddle. And this was the sole source. There's nobody else that can bring it. So that was kind of the crisis that greeted me when I came in. Anyway, long story short, we wound up reaching a settlement with Leapfrog. They did supply the product. We did a wholesale global restructuring. We closed 3 or 4 offices, including the office in the Bay Area that I was supposed to be based at. And I spent.
So you never got to move to LA at the time, or West Coast?
To California. It was an elusive dream. But I logged a lot of frequent flyer miles all over the world, and I did that for almost 2 years. Learned a lot
with 2 young kids.
With 2 young kids at home, and a wife who wasn't very happy with any part of it. But learned a lot about software licensing. Learned a lot about intellectual property. We had at Enodo, they have a huge IP portfolio. They have like over 350 patents. And I learned a lot about, everybody's like, oh, IP, right? You're a young entrepreneur, you're development, you're like, oh, I've got to develop my own IP. But really, IP is like a garden. Like there are things that you want to grow and water, and there are things that have to be pruned or pulled out, like weeds from a garden. And that really helped me understand the strategic priorities among that portfolio.
Right. It's not always like the conventional wisdom that people think, and especially in tech. I think IP enforcement and then patent trolls and that whole complexity.
Right.
I mean, like Apple and Samsung at the highest level, like this happens at the highest levels,
Yep.
but it's just very, very complex.
Correct.
So it's interesting that you had to study that.
Correct. And
as
I'm
part of the job.
also a big proponent, as I think Google is, of open source development,
Yeah,
of sharing, of learning, standing on the shoulders of other people in development. So I have a lot of sort of complex views on IP, but it was a great learning and development experience. But as you alluded to, it was really hard on my family personally. So basically, I came to sort of a crossroads, and I told the CEO, I'll help you for another 6 months, but I'm going to look to do something else. And by the grace of God, I got in touch with somebody on the West Coast who introduced me to SADA Systems, and started talking with your folks. And what I can say about SADA from the very beginning, and this I think segues nicely to what we'll talk about later, but it was just a best-in-class journey from start to finish. Everyone that I interacted with at SADA, and I've been around and interacted with a lot of clients, a lot of companies, was just immensely professional and thoughtful and kind and ambitious.
That's super flattering, by the way, because I really relish the concept of being best in class in the people experience, from like first interview to whenever you leave SADA, if you leave SADA, like that whole life cycle. So thank you for saying that. And I think we're probably even better now than we were, a year and a half ago at that. But going back to through your experiences real quick, first of all, thank you for your service. I always like to say that.
My pleasure.
I love hiring, people who've served this country and have like made the transition to private sector. Just so much goodness comes from that, I think, in terms of discipline, and especially in the types of roles you were playing. I think that there's some very highly intellectual roles and functions that you did for our country that probably prepared you really well for everything else. But so thank you for that. And then all the types of experiences you've had, I think firm life is very, very, it's like boot camp in like the legal world, right? Because the types of things you see and the working cadence and intensity, and I don't know if it's the same there as it is here, but like big firm life,
it is,
it's grueling, but it's also like the best training anybody can get.
For sure, yeah.
And then going in-house and dealing with a lot of complex tech things was what we saw, that whole chain of experiences. Obviously, we were attracted, and that was just on paper, and you don't always. What you get in real life isn't always what you expect when you read the paper, but that was really great. And then, of course, meeting you was interesting because we didn't expect anybody to move across the world to take this role, and we had interviewed a lot of people here, right?
Sure. Yeah, tons of
it was just so like we thought it was. I mean. We thought it was like a long shot, frankly, right? And we're like, is this? It feels like unnatural that we're pulling this whole family over, but of course it wasn't. It felt like the most natural thing, like from day one when you flew in and did your interview, and it was like love at first sight, which is rare for us. But we're like, is this guy for real? Because we ourselves are sure, enterprise and professional, whatever, but we have our quirks and people who get that.
Yeah. No,
and you're also remarkably funny, by the way. Most people, lawyers, are not funny. Your dry sense of humor cracks me up all the time. But again, so you had options. You're probably in some sort of a recruitment pool, maybe, because you told your boss you were going to do that. You probably had other options.
Yep.
Again, super honored at the time. I still am that you chose to come to work at SADA. Can you take us through the thought process around that? Yeah.
So, I mean, in some ways, you look at it in contrast to where you've been or where you are whenever you're evaluating opportunity, right? But why SADA? A couple of different things. It was a combination of the alpha and the beta, right? Like an investment. I love this metaphor, but like, the alpha is the unique part that leads to outperformance, and the beta is the market and all that sort of thing. So. I was super excited.
I like that, by the way.
Yeah,
Thank
please
you.
Feel free to use that freely.
I'm totally going to take credit for it,
royalty-free license to use that. So the beta, super excited about Google, about cloud. At the time, as you've told your listeners many times, we were a platform neutral partner between Google and Microsoft. But super excited about the cloud opportunity. I had read and worked with a lot of companies that had made that journey. Some of my clients had, and it's a through the cycle, almost recession-proof business opportunity, business case for transforming productivity in your organization.
Once every 50 years or 40 years.
And bringing about change.
Yeah, something like this happens. You're right.
And I think that when you're accompanying someone through a change, and a change that they've never done before, that is an incredibly honored position, privileged position, and a rewarding position. So the kind of work that I've always liked to do, and that I certainly like to do in Korea, was, we're a company. I had sometimes really small companies from the Midwest, and they didn't know Korea from Japan, China, whatever. And they're like, I don't even know how to dial overseas. Like, what's
a country code?
Yeah, exactly. So to help those companies achieve business success is really gratifying.
Super
and be
rewarding.
and to hear them say at the closing, thank you, we couldn't have gotten here without you. That's huge. And you guys, at SADA, you hear that every day, right? Because without your support, without your pathfinding, nobody goes from being an on-premises provider to a cloud business. So that was huge. I thought the growth opportunity was great. And as a lawyer, a lot of people don't think of this intuitively, but working for a high-growth company is enormously different than the experience you get in, for example, my prior company, which was fighting for survival.
Yes.
We went through it was intellectually challenging and stimulating, but it was just, it's difficult to know that a lot of people aren't going to continue on the journey sometimes.
Yeah, can I tell you that experience, and my father always says this, one lifetime is not long enough for you yourself to live through all the possible infinite experiences. But if I can surround myself with people who've gone through these things, that's how we avoid them to begin with. Right? Yeah. That's when you learn the best how to not get into that next time. When you're forced into it, even just once, makes you almost an expert at, I think, risk mitigation from that standpoint.
I think that's true, and I think it teaches you compassion and empathy, which are critical in a leader and a leadership team. And it also teaches you just a sense of fiduciary responsibility to the organization, and sometimes you have to make hard choices to help that organization survive. But I was excited because there was so much growth here, and also, not to sort of flatter you, Tony, and I know I'm here at your invitation, but I was impressed by, first of all, I think it's a great American success story that you and your family have built here.
For sure.
For those of you who don't know, Tony's parents co-founded the company and are still very active in the business. And to come back here and see that dream, when there's so much cynicism now for many reasons, it's really cool.
The American dream is not dead.
It absolutely is
what
not.
I like to say.
It absolutely is not. It's alive here in North Hollywood. And I think also from interacting with you and the rest of the team and Hovig and Annie, I thought there was a great mix, and I see it every day, of ambition, tremendous ambition and optimism, but also humility of saying, hey, we've done something big, but we know that what got us here isn't going to get us there.
Totally.
Let's surround ourselves with people who can maybe contribute and complement what we have and take us to an even different plane.
Yes.
And not everybody can do that. Some people will say, I know it all myself. I don't need your help. What I know, I know. And that receptivity to continuous learning is a great credit to you and to the organization. And I think third is just the tremendous culture values fit here. A lot of companies try to do that, but it's tremendously hard. They wind up just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think in 19 years here, you've really, I went and read every Glassdoor review. I talked to people because I've been or worked with companies that were somewhat, toxic, and almost, no one has an unkind word, whether it's customer, partner, employee, contractor, etc., about SADA systems.
You did your research.
I really did. So I was super impressed by that.
That's
I said,
awesome.
These are good people going to good places who are looking for like-minded teammates. And you get to a point in your life or your career where it's all about the people that you're going to be working with.
Yeah, and I think our COO Dana came in at the same time, and then Miles most recently. I think you can kind of see the caliber and the values fit that we're creating, at the highest levels. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, and one of the reasons, and look, we had some pretty good outside help
For sure.
and we definitely we put like your role into categories like we do. You have like three main things that we need you to do at SADA. Really, number one, and what we needed you to take over first, and not because we didn't have good outside help. We had probably the best outside help anyone can have.
Fantastic.
But we were getting to a point in size and volume that we looked at having in-house legal as a differentiator and a competitive advantage.
Right.
Because the theory was it would even more improve the customer experience.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what you have done to help make SADA be the easiest company to work with and buy from.
Right.
And what we're doing to make it actually better and easier to contract with SADA than buy anything direct from Google.
Right. No, I think that's huge, and I see myself as one of the first points of contact with the customer. Right. When you're getting into, besides our sales team, which are tremendous, you want that customer to enjoy every aspect of their experience with SADA from start to finish,
100%.
of execution, and that includes legal, contracting, etc. So, I mean, some of the things we've done here is we've tried to automate, simplify, expedite the review, redline, discussion process as much as we can. We try to get back to the customer in 24 to 48 hours, which you won't hear from many other legal departments. When there is an issue, and sometimes that certainly there are, my instinct is always to get on the phone as quickly as I can. I had a call actually. We had a customer whose license was expiring recently, and they were in a fix where they needed a renewal fast, and we were going through a redlining exercise, and I think I sent them some stuff around data privacy, and they said, well, we'll have to run this through. It might take a while, and I said, absolutely, take whatever time you need. But at the time, I didn't know that they had just a few days left, so he thought I was being flippant, basically, by saying that. It's just one of those things and I think we all see this, like when you're exchanging, an email or a message with something, context gets
lost in translation.
So immediately I got on the phone with them and I said, look, I didn't mean any disrespect whatsoever. I didn't know you were in this situation. Let's just see if we can talk through. Basically, they were asking us, long story short, to sort of deviate from what our standing position is on a certain issue. But I said, you've been an honest broker with us. I know we have an agreement in place already. We can make an exception and get this done quickly. And he was very appreciative.
That saved the day for them.
It saved the day, and the seller's appreciative. So obviously, I have a multi-sided business model like we do. I mean, we have partners, we have Google, we have customers. I have the sales team that I support. Obviously, I have you and the management team to help and support. I have the customer, and then I have the fiduciary responsibility to this organization as a whole.
That's right.
Right, and you talk a lot. Quite eloquently about building a forever company, and so it's not about this salesman's needs or this customer's needs, but how do we make sure this organization can survive and prosper through the cycle, through the years, through the history. And
we want to be very easy to work with, but not irresponsible.
Right, and
that's the balance.
Exactly, and sometimes that's a hard balance to strike, but it's a critical balance. So we try to do that as much as we can. Just yesterday, I was working with a salesman who's relatively new. I think it's his first really good deal opportunity, which we're super excited to support. And he sent me a note and he said it's really nice to work with a lawyer who gets it. And I was very flattered by that.
It's a great compliment.
Yeah. You don't want to be a weather vane that blows with the wind, but you definitely want to be clear and consistent. And I think if you do that, people will respect you when you have thick skin.
And look, I think what customers sometimes have in-house, or even if not, what they're used to seeing on the other side is and this is the bad reputation that I think the wrong type of attorneys have created.
Mm-hmm.
Just a broad-based assumption that your job is to get in the way.
Right.
You start with no.
Yeah, Dr. No.
Dr. No, right? And I think that's precisely the opposite of what we want to build. It's like how? How do we get there? And I think you do a really good job of striking a balance between what the sellers want to do, because obviously they just want to close deals, and then what customers need, and what Google terms of service, and protecting the company. And again, building this competency in-house. I've always said, look, if you want to be the best in class at something, you can't outsource it.
No.
And so I think we're making great strides. We're going to make even further workflow improvements with our ERP system going in, and other things. But I hear all the time that the sales team loves working with you.
That's good.
Because they can just pull you in on the phone, in a room, look at the contract, and that speed and that velocity is just so important, because time kills deals.
Definitely.
It creates uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
and we never want to be the reason that a deal is stalled or gets delayed. And I know for a fact you're easier to get on the phone than any Google attorney.
Yes.
So
not a high bar to clear, but yes.
But no, they're getting better.
They are better.
But we'll always be easier and more flexible,
right,
than buying direct from Google.
Right. And I think as we build that rapport, and I try to make it an individual, so every time a new salesperson, because you talk about how do we achieve that,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is also getting simpatico with every salesman that comes on board.
Mm-hmm.
So I've asked people,
salesman or woman,
salesperson, that comes on board. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked people ops to make an introduction, and I do like a Google Hangout, right? Because we are growing not only in HQ, but with all these regional offices now, all over the country, now in Toronto as well. So sometimes putting a name to a face, talking to somebody on the phone makes an enormous difference. So yeah, that's all part of what we're trying to build here.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to grow. The Google business will grow like 60% this year, and we haven't yet started to look at next year. But again, Google's GCP business will double. For Google, will double every year for the next 3 years.
Fantastic.
So we know the task at hand, and we love where we are, and we're appreciative of where we are. But it just creates, I think, a higher degree of responsibility and this feeling of obligation to the market and to our customers.
Right.
The other pillars that are really important is, because we're building the forever company, and this is another aspect of your resume which is interesting, is just this board governance experience.
Yeah.
After the executive, C-suite was essentially filled, the next task at hand for me as a CEO was to recruit, and create a truly productive board with independent fiduciary outside board members, outside of the family, and we've started that journey. We're taking our time, but I really appreciate that. But the fact that you're our board secretary now and have that experience is super helpful.
Yeah, it's been fun. We've spoken to a lot of tremendous people.
Yeah.
You and I and Hovig, and we're speaking to a few more.
Isn't it flattering, the kind of people that want to be on our board?
Really is. It's so exciting, because I think a lot of people view the opportunity, and it's validating too for both of us, right? Because people see the opportunity the way we do, and that's nice to hear. Yeah. They see where we are, they see where we're going. A lot of them have been in places where they've seen, how the movie script evolves, right? And they can help us navigate those pitfalls. Yeah. So, yeah, it's super exciting and can just complement what we're already building in the C-suite here. So it's great.
So we're close to making those types of decisions, and it's exciting, because I can only imagine like that level of additional experience and guidance and experience, just experience coming to the forefront to hold all of us accountable, right? And I want to be held accountable, not only by you, by my C-suite, but my executive team, but by the board. And I actually look forward to that degree of challenge. And I think, look, if we continue this orientation just around humility, introspection, self-awareness. If you're tougher on yourself than everybody else, then you'll seldom disappoint your customers or Google or the market.
That's right.
That's kind of how I look at it.
That's right. And if you're, as one of our candidates were saying, like if you're doing the right things, if you're best at what you do, you don't have to worry about the competition. You'll win that forever game.
Yeah,
which is great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot, even. We've known each other for a long time, but that's why I love doing this podcast, because I end up learning a lot. And I appreciate all the work that you do, and we look forward to having a great end and finish to 2019, and I feel super bullish about 2020.
Me too. I'm so excited to see what the next chapter is going to be, and there's no one I'd rather ride with than you and the rest of the team here.
And we can't do what we're trying to do without you, so it's perfect.
All right.
Thanks,
you,
Patrick.
Brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.